Welcome to Landing the Moon. I'm Max, joined as always by Blake. And okay, so get this. NASA's IG report just dropped, and the headline is basically, the suits might not show up to the moon landing.
Which would be a problem.
Yeah, kind of a deal breaker. According to NASA's OIG report, IG 26-006, if Axiom's xEMU development follows historical averages, those spacesuit demonstrations don't happen until 2031, 3 years after the planned 2028 lunar landing.
And Axiom's own revised target is late 2027, already a slip of roughly 18 months from where NASA originally planned.
Right. And the original schedule gave Axiom 3.4 years from contract award to test flight. The historical average for programs like this?
Wow.
8.7 years.
That's not optimism. That's fiction.
Plot twist? It was always fiction.
So today we dig into how we got here. Space News and NASA Spaceflight both covered the OIG findings, and the picture is pretty consistent. 2 contractors in 2022, one walked out by 2024, and now Axiom is carrying the whole thing.
Collins' allies spent $37 million of NASA's money and bailed. We'll get into why that failure matters more than people are admitting.
And we're going to pressure test the contract structure itself. Was a firm fixed price service model ever the right call for hardware with no commercial market?
Plus the engineering piece, because the xEMU has a lander compatibility problem with Blue Origin's Blue Moon Mk2 that the OIG says NASA never required a standard to prevent.
And we close by looking at whether Axiom's $350 million raise and CEO Jonathan Surtain's pledge to fly a suit in 2027 actually move the needle, or just prove the program is still breathing.
All right, let's get into the news. Okay, so get this. Artemis 2 just landed its crew. Everyone's celebrating. And buried under all that coverage, on April 20th, NASA Office of Inspector General quietly dropped report IG-26-006. Barely anyone picked it up.
Walk me through what's actually in it.
So, NASA Spaceflight covered this. The OIG looked at the xEVAS spacesuit program and concluded NASA is unlikely to have next-generation suits ready for the 2028 lunar landing.
How far off are we talking?
So, according to the OIG report, if Axiom tracks with the historical average for recent NASA programs, the suit demonstrations might not happen until 2031.
Wow.
That's 3 years after the planned landing.
2031, okay. Where does that number actually come from?
So here's the thing, and this is where it gets good. The OIG looked at programs like SLS, Orion, Commercial Cargo, Commercial Crew. The historical average from contract award to test flight across those programs is 8.7 years.
And Axiom assumed
3.4 years for the lunar suit, 3.8 for the ISS suit. Less than half.
So they planned for less than half the time history says it actually takes.
Yeah, and Space News reported the original targets were November 2025 for the lunar demo and April 2026 for the ISS suit demo.
Which have both already passed.
Both passed. As of January 2026, Axiom is now targeting late 2027 for both. That's an 18-month slip on each, and the OIG says even that revised target has, quote, little to no schedule margin.
So to be clear, the optimistic scenario is still a year late, and the historically grounded scenario is 2031.
That's the gap. And look, Space News noted the OIG isn't calling 2031 a hard prediction. They're framing it as a more realistic benchmark based on how these programs actually run.
That framing is doing a lot of work.
It really is. And the thing is, NASA and Axiom both pushed back. NASA Administrator Isaacman said he's confident astronauts will be in Axiom suits when the agency lands in 2028. Axiom CEO said they're building the most advanced lunar suit ever.
Those are confidence statements. Walk me through what they're actually pointing to as evidence.
That's a shorter list. Talk of Titusville noted that Axiom's xEVAS program manager gave an interview literally 4 days before the OIG report dropped, saying they'd be ready.
Timing.
And then the OIG report lands and says, based on historical data, probably not.
So we've got a single contractor already 18 months behind, operating against a historical average that says this kind of work takes more than twice as long as planned. How did NASA get to a place where there's only one company on this at all?
That is the question.
Short pause. Short pause. So here's what I keep coming back to. In May 2022, NASA awards xEVAS contracts to Axiom and Collins, combined ceiling of $3.1 billion. The whole logic of the structure was two vendors, right? Competition as a hedge.
Exactly. Axiom gets the lunar suit, Collins gets the ISS suit. You've got redundancy baked in. Sounds smart.
Walk me through what Collins was actually tasked with. They got a $97 million task order to develop an ISS suit and demonstrate it in a simulated space environment. The 2026 ISS demonstration was the milestone.
And they never got there. June 2024, Collins and NASA mutually agreed to de-scope. The official NASA statement says Collins recognized its timeline wouldn't support the station's schedule.
Mutually agreed to de-scope. That's a polite way of saying one side couldn't perform.
No, for sure. Very diplomatic. NASA had already spent $37 million on Collins' work before they walked.
$37 million. And the output was?
Some parabolic flight tests, a prototype, no flight-certified hardware.
Wow.
And Collins still, by the way, maintains the aging EMU suits currently on ISS under a separate contract.
So the company they cut from the next generation program is still the one keeping the old suits alive.
Yep, Collins is basically the caretaker of the hardware they were supposed to replace.
That's a situation.
Here's the thing, though, Blake. The $37 million question is whether anyone inside NASA treated Collins' slow progress as a warning sign early enough to do something about it.
And based on the OIG report, per NASA spaceflight's coverage, the answer looks like no. The OIG said NASA's goals to demo suits in 2025 and 2026 were, quote, overly optimistic.
So they set an aggressive schedule, one vendor couldn't hit it, exits in 2024, and now Axiom is the only active provider for both the lunar and ISS suits.
No competition, no fallback. The hedge is gone.
And here's the dark part. If Axiom hits problems, there is no Collins waiting in the wings anymore. There's just nobody.
Which raises an obvious question. Why did NASA structure this as a firm fixed-price, service-based contract, the same model that worked for commercial cargo and commercial crew?
And spoiler, there's a key difference.
A pretty important one, and that's exactly where the argument starts to crack open.
So here's the assumption I want to pressure test. NASA looked at commercial crew, looked at commercial cargo, and said, same model, different hardware. Where does that logic actually come from?
I mean, Dragon worked. Cygnus worked. You could see the appeal.
Sure, but those programs had something xEVAS didn't. SpaceX and Boeing already had customers beyond NASA, or at least a plausible path to them. That's the whole premise of a commercial services contract. You're not the only buyer, you're just the anchor tenant. Right. So the commercial model works when a market already exists or is about to.
And the IOG is pretty direct about this. NASA spaceflight's coverage of the report. Until xEVAS was awarded, no commercial market for spacesuits existed. Zero.
Wow.
So NASA wasn't plugging into a market, it was trying to conjure one.
Okay, so get this though. I'd push back slightly. Was the contract model really the core problem, or did NASA just set fantasy timelines from day one? Because you could have the best contract structure in the world, and if you're asking for lunar suit demos in 3.4 years when the historical average is nearly 9, that's not a procurement failure, that's a math failure.
Both things can be true.
Fair.
And honestly, the IOG makes both points. Space News reported it clearly. The contract model was wrong for the technical risk profile, and the original schedules were, quote, overly optimistic and ultimately proved unachievable. Those aren't competing explanations, they compounded each other.
Okay, yeah, I'll grant that.
And then there's the bidder problem, which nobody talks about enough. NASA required companies to bid on both the lunar suit and the microgravity suit simultaneously. The register flagged this specifically. Overly burdensome requirements that shrunk an already thin pool. Only 2 companies bid. On what? Of how many interested parties? Dozens. Space News reported it. Dozens on the interested parties list, 2 complete proposals by the deadline. And one of those 2, Axiom, had 0 prior spacesuit development experience.
Great vetting process.
Collins had the experience, terrible management. Axiom had the ambition, no track record. That's not a robust bidder field.
So what does NASA actually do about it now? The OIG made 2 formal recommendations,
both of which NASA concurred with. Starless covered this. Seek industry input on xEVAS requirements before September 2027 and develop an interoperability standard across all Artemis vehicles. NASA set December 31st, 2027 as the target for both.
December 27th, and the landing is 2028? So the interoperability standard gets finalized with maybe months to spare before a crewed lunar mission?
That is the math, yes.
I love how they concur with everything and then schedule the fix for a date that makes it basically useless.
To be fair, concurring with an OIG recommendation is better than fighting it, but the timeline does leave almost no margin.
And look, whatever the contract says, whatever the acquisition strategy turns out to have been, someone still has to physically build a suit that works. And the place the suit has to work is one of the harshest environments we've ever tried to send a person into. Permanent shadow, South Pole craters, temperatures way below anything Apollo ever faced. That's the engineering problem sitting behind all of this policy debate.
And that's exactly where it gets harder.
So here's the engineering mountain Axiom actually has to climb. The Apollo suits never went near the lunar South Pole. Those missions landed at the equator, where sunlight is predictable and temperatures stay in a manageable band. The South Pole is a completely different animal.
How different?
Permanently shadowed craters. We're talking temperatures that drop to around -200 Celsius or colder. The suit has to stay operational down there for at least 2 hours.
That's not just insulation. That's a full life support redesign.
Right, and that's exactly where the OIG flagged real trouble. A NASA deputy administrator said in late 2024 that Axiom was struggling to redesign the AxEMU life support system. The OIG cited mass constraints, oxygen, water, and power requirements all being renegotiated at once.
Walk me through what that means in practice.
Picture a backpack that has to breathe for you, cool you, heat you, and keep you pressurized, all within a strict weight budget. Change one variable and 3 others break. That's why life support redesigns are so expensive in time.
Okay, but there's something in the OIG report I want to press on. The Blue Moon airlock issue. What actually happened there?
Oh, this is where it gets good. So, dawn-off area, that just means the space inside the lander's airlock where astronauts put the suit on and take it off before a moonwalk. Think of it like a changing room bolted to the side of the spacecraft.
Got it.
They do not fit together. According to Talk of Titusville's reporting on the OIG, Blue Origin now has to either substantially rework its crew module airlock or build entirely custom hardware to accommodate Axiom's design. Either path adds cost to NASA.
Where does that assumption come from, though? Why didn't nobody require a standard?
NASA never mandated one, and the OIG says that was a mistake. The recommendation is to create something like a consolidated vehicle-to-suit interface control document, basically a mil-spec equivalent for how suits connect to landers.
So we're adding a standards document to the list of things that should have been existed before the contracts were signed.
Yeah, the standard stock, the acquisition model, the timeline. We are accumulating a full checklist of should have done this first.
And none of this is abstract anymore. Blue Moon's crew module design is taking shape now. The longer this interface mismatch sits unresolved, the more expensive the fix gets.
Exactly. The OIG flagged December 2027 as when interoperability has to be sorted, and Axiom is simultaneously trying to close out life support redesigns, pass qualification testing, and hit that same deadline.
So the question hanging over all of this is whether what Axiom delivers in 2027 is genuinely flight-certified hardware or something with a lot of asterisks still attached.
That's the question. And Axiom's public answer to that is, well, that's exactly what we need to get into. So here's the thing. 4 days before the OIG dropped their report, Axiom's xEVAS program manager, Tammy Radford, told reporters flat out, "We're going to be ready for the Artemis mission." 4 days.
And then the OIG publishes historical math that says, based on how these programs actually go, you're looking at 2031. So you've got two authoritative sources reading the same program completely differently.
And then Isigman jumps in. On April 21st, same day the report lands, NASA's administrator posts on X, "I am confident that when NASA is ready to land on the moon in 2028, our astronauts will be wearing Axiom suits." He's backing Axiom publicly while also acknowledging the OIG's acquisition concerns in the same breath.
Walk me through the math on that confidence, though. What's actually backing it up?
So Axiom's got real milestones. Back in February, according to NASASpaceflight.com, they passed a contractor-led technical review. Same day, they announced a $350 million raise, Qatar Investment Authority co-leading. Parts for the first flight unit had started arriving.
Those are a genuine checkpoint, but here's where I'd push back. Passing a contractor-led review is not the same as passing NASA's critical design sync review. Axiom ran their own test and said they passed.
Right. We graded our own homework and got an A.
And the $350 million, that's real money, but funding doesn't compress a certification timeline. The thermal vac test, the qualification suit, the EVA demonstration, those have physics. You can't throw cash at a pressurized suit test and make it go faster.
Okay, so here's what Axiom CEO Jonathan Certain actually said at the Space Symposium. He said, one way or another, whether it's to ISS or on HLS, we're going to fly a suit in 2027. And that's a meaningful distinction.
It is, because flying a suit and flying a flight-certified suit ready for lunar EVA are not the same sense.
Exactly. That's the asterisk. The 2027 Artemis 3 orbital test will almost certainly put an xEMU in space. Whether it comes back with a clean certification bill or a punch list the length of your arm, that's the question nobody can answer yet.
And that's the prediction I'd make. Axiom gets hardware into orbit in 2027. The data from that test either compresses the 2028 timeline or blows it open. We'll know which by the end of next year.
Put it in the calendar. We revisit this when Artemis 3 comes back. Okay, so here's what I keep coming back to after this one. NASA drew up a 3-year plan for the lunar suit. The IOG looked at the historical average and basically said, yeah, that was never real.
And that's the thing. The optimistic scenario is still late. The historically grounded one puts us at 2031, according to NASA's own Inspector General.
Collins exits, airlock compatibility never got a standard, and now Axiom is holding both contracts. There's a lot riding on one company.
The consensus was that competition would be the hedge. That assumption didn't survive contact with the actual procurement.
If this episode helped you cut through the noise on Artemis, share it with someone still trying to figure out why getting back to the moon is this complicated.
Subscribe wherever you listen. We'll be back next week to see how much of this week's optimism actually holds up.
Warmest thanks. We'll see you on the next one.